The notification arrived at 2:47 p.m. on a Thursday, and I almost missed it. My phone buzzed. One message from Dad, 2 words and a screenshot. Call now. Below that was a bank statement showing $187,000 withdrawn from the joint family account, the one that was supposed to be untouchable, the one Dad had set aside for all 3 of us kids when we turned 30. I was 29. I had 6 months left. My hand went numb first, then my throat closed. I stared at the numbers, reading them over and over like they might rearrange themselves into something that made sense. The withdrawal was dated 4 days ago, Saturday, the same day my brother Marcus's wedding had taken place. The wedding I wasn't invited to. I didn't call Dad back immediately. Instead, I sat on the edge of my bed in my apartment in Portland, a 1-bedroom place I'd saved for 3 years to afford, and I tried to breathe normally. My chest wasn't cooperating. My hands were shaking. I knew exactly who took that money. And I knew exactly why. But I didn't know yet that this moment, this single text message, this screenshot of stolen numbers, would become the thread I'd pull until everything unraveled. I just knew I was going to destroy them. My name is Catherine Wells. I'm an architect, not the kind that designs skyscrapers, the kind that designs homes. Small, beautiful things that fit into people's lives like they were always meant to be there. I'd spent the last 2 years working toward my professional license. The exam was in 3 months. I was on track. My career was the one thing I'd built entirely on my own, without family money, without connections, without anything except my own ability to see space and imagine it better. That matters to you later, so remember that. I grew up in Seattle. My father, Richard Wells, is a successful man, quiet, reserved. He made his money in commercial real estate in the 1990s and retired early to focus on what he called the family's legacy. That meant sitting us kids down when we turned 18 and explaining that he'd set up trust accounts for each of us. $50,000 at 25, $190,000 at 30, but only if we met certain conditions. The conditions were reasonable. Finish college. Stay employed. No felonies, no substance abuse. Don't marry without a prenup. He was very serious about that one. I'd always seen it as Dad's way of being involved in our futures. It felt like love in a way. Like he was saying, I trust you enough to help you build something. I didn't understand it was a cage until it was too late. My brother Marcus was 3 years older. Golden. That's the only word for it. He was born good-looking, charming, naturally athletic, and emotionally intelligent in a way that made people trust him immediately. Teachers loved him. His friends loved him. Even our parents' friends loved him. When he went to college, he studied business. When he graduated, he went straight into our father's company as a junior partner. Within 5 years, he was running the commercial real estate division. Within 8, he was on the board. He was supposed to be the legacy. My sister Sophie was the middle child. She was sweet in a diffused way, always trying to make peace between the rest of us, never quite sure who she was independently. She'd majored in psychology but spent her 20s working temp jobs and living with different boyfriends. Dad had always been gentle with her. She was the one he checked on, the one he worried about. I was the youngest, the ambitious one, the one who wanted something different from the family business, which made me the complicated one. When I was 8 years old, I drew a house that didn't have corners. Every wall curved. My kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Liu, showed it to everyone at pickup. She said I had an unusual mind. She meant it as a compliment. I became obsessed with architecture after that. Not buildings, spaces, how rooms made you feel, why some houses felt like home and others felt like tombs. I filled sketchbooks with floor plans and elevations. By the time I was in high school, I was teaching myself CAD software in the library. Dad supported it quietly. He never pushed me toward the business. He just asked about my projects at dinner and listened while I explained them. That was before Marcus told him I was stealing. Let me back up. I need you to understand the context. 2 years ago, I had just graduated from my master's program in architecture. The job market was competitive. I was freelancing, small residential projects, mostly renovations, while studying for my licensing exam. I was living very carefully on very little money. My father had offered to let me move home for 6 months to save money. The offer was genuine. He'd said, "I have a guest house. It sits empty. Stay as long as you need. No rent." The guest house was on the edge of my parents' property in Seattle, a small cottage that they'd originally built for my mother's mother. It was charming and private, and it felt like a safety net that would give me time to breathe. I stayed for 4 months. I saved aggressively. I prepared for my licensing exam. I was, objectively, in a stable place mentally and financially. Then one Saturday in March, 2 years ago, my father asked me to meet him in his study. I remember the light in that room. It came from tall windows that faced the garden, and it was the kind of early spring light that feels like a promise. I wasn't nervous. I had no reason to be nervous. He was sitting behind his desk, a massive walnut thing that had belonged to his grandfather, and he looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept. "I need to ask you something," he said, "and I need you to tell me the truth." My stomach clenched. "Have you taken money from the family account?" I remember staring at him. I remember thinking for a moment that I didn't understand the question. I had never taken money from the family account. I'd never even accessed it. My personal trust account was separate and untouched until the distribution date. "No," I said. He watched me for a long time. "Someone took $40,000 out of the account last month. I'm having the bank review the transactions. I wanted to hear from you first." I felt my face get hot. "Dad, I didn't. I swear I didn't." "I believe you," he said, but he didn't sound like he believed me. "Who told you it was me?" He hesitated. Marcus mentioned he'd noticed something odd in the account statements. He asked if I'd authorized a large withdrawal. I said no. We looked into it together. "Marcus," I felt something sharp in my chest. Why would Marcus assume it was me? He didn't assume anything. He was just concerned. But that wasn't true, and I think we both knew it. The bank investigated. The money had been transferred electronically to an account I'd never seen. My father brought in a forensic accountant. She reviewed the access logs. The account that transferred the money was authorized under my login. But I hadn't done it. I knew I hadn't done it. What I didn't know was how to prove it. They found my laptop in the study where I'd been working on renovation drawings. The forensic accountant discovered that the transfer had been made from my laptop at 11:47 p.m. on a night when I was asleep in the cottage. They found cookies from my browser linking to the bank's website. "Did you let anyone use your laptop?" the accountant asked me. I thought I always left it open. I wasn't paranoid. This was my family home. "Marcus was here that week," I said slowly. "He came by to pick up some of his things from his old room." My father and I looked at each other. I saw it happen, the moment he considered it, and then I saw him reject it. "Marcus wouldn't need to steal from the family," he said. "He has access to the company accounts. He has more money than he knows what to do with." He was right about that, which meant he was even more convinced I was lying. Without telling me, my father consulted a lawyer. The lawyer advised him to freeze my trust account pending further investigation. The lawyer also told him that technically this was theft, that he could file a police report. He didn't file one, but the threat lived in the air between us like a ghost. I moved out of the guest house 3 days later. Over the next 18 months, things shifted slowly. Dad didn't accuse me directly anymore, but he was colder. He forgot to ask about my projects. When I called, the conversations were brief. He was busy. The company had demands. We'd talk soon. Marcus came to my apartment once during that year. He brought a bottle of wine and an expression of professional sympathy that I found nauseating. "I feel terrible about this," he said, sitting on my couch. "I wish I'd realized it was going to cause this rift. I was just trying to help Dad understand what was happening with the money." "You set me up," I said. "Catherine," He looked genuinely hurt. Why would I do that? Because you wanted Dad to doubt me. Because you needed him to think I was the kind of person who would steal from the family. He set down his wine glass carefully. That's a serious accusation. If I'd wanted to damage your relationship with Dad, I wouldn't need to engineer something complicated like that. I could just tell him you'd been drinking too much or seeing someone problematic. Simple rumors work better than elaborate schemes. He was right, which made it worse. Then why frame me? I didn't frame you. He looked at me with an expression of profound sadness. Catherine, sometimes bad things happen and there's no villain. Sometimes people just make mistakes they can't undo. This was his gift. This was why everyone loved him. He could take a situation where he'd absolutely destroyed you, and he could make you question whether destruction had even occurred. He could make you feel crazy for suggesting it. I started keeping meticulous records after that. All our communications, all my transactions, everything. I got security cameras installed in my apartment. I changed every password. I backed up all my files. I wasn't crazy. I was just making sure I could prove it when the moment came. And then, last week, Marcus got engaged. The engagement announcement came via a family group chat. Marcus had proposed to his girlfriend, Vanessa, at some resort in Napa. They decided to get married quickly. Small ceremony. Only close family. Only close family, Dad wrote. I felt something bitter coat my throat. I texted Dad privately. I assume I'm not being invited. His response came an hour later. Catherine, you know how complex things are right now. We thought it might be easier for everyone if you sat this one out. We can celebrate separately. Easier. The word sat in my stomach like a stone. For 18 months, I'd been trying to prove my innocence in a theft I didn't commit. For 18 months, I'd watched my father quietly choose to believe his golden son over his daughter. For 18 months, I'd been frozen out of family events, family decisions, family everything. And now, my brother was getting married without me. That was when I understood something crucial. My father was never going to believe me. The lawyer had probably told him the evidence seemed airtight. The forensic accountant had probably said it looked like an inside job. His son had probably been very helpful in understanding the situation. The story they believed was simpler and more satisfying than the truth. They weren't going to examine it too closely. But the exclusion from the wedding broke something in me that the false accusation hadn't. I called my father. He answered after 4 rings. I could hear the reluctance in his breathing. Don't do this, he said before I'd even spoken. Don't do what? Don't make the wedding about you. Marcus has been looking forward to this for months. He's happy. Please don't make this difficult. I'm not making anything difficult. I'm asking why my family is shutting me out. We're not shutting you out. We need time. There's hurt here. You understand that? I understand that I'm innocent. Catherine, his voice went soft. That was worse than anger. Softness meant he'd made a final decision. I want to believe you, I really do, but the evidence was faked by Marcus, using my laptop while I was asleep. That's possible. It's theoretically possible. But there are a lot of possibilities in life, and we have to choose which ones we believe in based on what we actually know. And what I know is that my son has never given me reason to doubt him, and my daughter is asking me to believe something complicated that paints my son as a criminal. I held the phone away from my ear because I thought I might scream. You're choosing, I said quietly. You're not investigating, you're choosing. Yes, he said. I'm choosing my peace. I'm choosing to believe the person who's been honest with me, and right now that's Marcus. He hung up before I could respond. The wedding was on Saturday. My father did not ask me to attend. My mother called me on Friday. She always was more practical than Dad, and offered to explain what happened at the reception so I wouldn't feel like I'd missed something important. I told her I had a client meeting and wouldn't be available anyway. I was lying. I spent the day in my apartment, alone, watching the family wedding photos appear on Instagram in real time. There was Marcus at the altar, looking joyful. Vanessa in a white dress, radiant. My parents in the front row, smiling. My sister Sophie as a bridesmaid, happy. Everyone who mattered in my family in one place, celebrating without me. And then, 4 days later, Dad sent me the screenshot of the missing $190,000. I didn't call Dad back immediately. I sat with the information for exactly 23 minutes. I timed it because later, I wanted to remember that there was a moment when I could have reacted emotionally. A moment when I could have fallen apart or screamed or cried. I let that moment pass. Instead, I opened my laptop and I started to think. The money had been withdrawn 4 days ago. Saturday, the day of the wedding, that wasn't accidental. That was a message. That was Marcus saying, "You're cut off, you're out. This is what happens to people who don't belong." But it was also something else. It was a mistake. Marcus had gotten comfortable. He'd gotten confident. After 18 months of nothing, 18 months of me not fighting, not accusing him publicly, not pressing charges, he'd thought I was broken. He thought I'd accepted the narrative, that I'd internalized the guilt, that I'd become the person he'd made me out to be. So he'd stopped being careful. And he'd stolen from me on a day that was documented through 1,000 photographs and videos. A day when every single member of my family had time-stamped evidence of exactly what they were doing. I pulled up my cloud backup. I had saved every bank statement, every email, every piece of communication from the last 2 years. I had screenshots of the first $40,000 theft. I had dates. I had times. I had everything. What I didn't have was proof that Marcus had done it. What I had was the evidence that someone had. What I had was the evidence that it had happened while I was asleep, using my laptop, using my access. What I had was a clear pattern of behavior that started exactly when Marcus wanted to damage my relationship with my father. I needed something else. I opened my phone, and I called my father back. He answered on the second ring. I could hear him bracing himself for a fight. "I didn't take the money," I said. I kept my voice calm, steady, sad. "But I know who did." "Catherine, just listen, please." I told him about the first withdrawal, about Marcus's opportunity to access my laptop, about the timing, the way it had coincided with Dad questioning my character, about the narrative it created. I told him I'd never fought back, never accused Marcus publicly, because I'd been trying to protect the family. But I couldn't protect the family if I let this happen again. "I'm going to the bank tomorrow," I said. "I'm going to request a full forensic audit of both withdrawals. I'm going to hire a cybersecurity expert to examine the access logs. I'm going to push this to the police if I have to." My father was silent. "I'm giving you the chance to help me figure this out before that happens, but I'm not waiting anymore. I'm done waiting." He said, "Let me talk to Marcus." "Okay," I said. "You talk to Marcus, but I'm pursuing this tomorrow regardless of what he says." I hung up. Then I did something crucial. I created a new email address using a VPN. I sent myself a timestamp-verified copy of every piece of evidence I had. I uploaded everything to a secure cloud server that required 2-factor authentication. I printed copies and locked them in a safe deposit box at a bank that wasn't the one my family used. I was building a backup plan because I understood now that my father was never going to betray Marcus. Not really. Not when it counted. Marcus was the legacy. I was the complication. My phone rang 40 minutes later. It was my mother. "Your father told me what's happening," she said, "and what you're planning to do." "Good," I said. "Catherine, this is going to destroy the family." "The family is already destroyed. I'm just being honest about it." There was a long silence. "Marcus says he didn't take the money." "He's lying." "How can you know that?" "Because I know him. Because I've watched him lie to Dad's face for 18 months while everyone believed him. Because he had the access, he had the motive, he had the opportunity." "You don't have proof." "Not yet." "Catherine, listen to me. Your brother has just gotten married. Your father's health hasn't been great. I know you're angry and you have every right to be. But this isn't. This isn't what? I interrupted. This isn't convenient. This isn't the moment you'd choose. Congratulations. It's not convenient for me either. It's not the moment I'd choose. But Marcus chose this moment to steal from me on the day of his wedding, knowing it would humiliate me, knowing it would prove that I don't belong to this family. You belong. I don't. That's okay. I've made peace with that, but I'm not going to sit quietly while he takes what's mine. I hung up. It was exactly 9:34 p.m. on a Thursday night, and that was the moment I stopped being someone's daughter and started being someone's reckoning. The next morning, I was at the bank when they opened. I brought a folder full of documents, my identification, the copies of the account statements, a written request for a forensic audit. The bank manager, a woman named Patricia who knew my family because Dad had banked with them for 30 years, looked uncomfortable when I handed her the folder. "This is unusual," she said, flipping through the pages. "A lot of money is missing," I said. "Money that was in a joint account belonging to my father and his 3 adult children. I need to know exactly what happened to it." "Of course, I'll need to have our investigation department look into this. This could take several weeks." Several weeks was not fast enough. I couldn't let my father talk himself into believing Marcus. I couldn't let the story settle. "I also need you to provide me with a detailed access log," I said. "Every login, every device, every IP address associated with the account, and I need it by the end of the week." Patricia looked like she wanted to say no, but I was the account holder. The request was legal. She nodded slowly. "I'll see what I can do," she said. I left the bank, and I went straight to my lawyer. I'd hired him 2 years ago, right after the first theft. His name was Robert Chen, and he was meticulous about documentation and very clear about liability. He'd been advising me to pursue the matter legally from the beginning. I'd resisted because I'd still believed, foolishly, that the truth would come out on its own. "They stole from you again," he said when I told him what happened. He said it like this was the least surprising development in human history. "I need you to file a report with the police. I need you to send a cease and desist letter to my family. And I need you to help me build a case that will hold up in court." He nodded and started taking notes. "This is going to escalate things," he said. "Once you file with the police, there's no going back." "I know. Your father might not forgive you." "He's already not forgiving me. At least this way, there will be a reason." Robert helped me file the report the next day. The detective assigned to the case was a woman named Sarah Kershaw, who specialized in financial crimes. She listened to my statement for 2 hours, asked detailed questions about the access logs and the forensic accounting that had been done previously, and told me that if the evidence was as compelling as I described, they'd open a formal investigation. "Your brother will be contacted," she said. "He'll know there's an investigation. He might claim he's being framed. He might claim his sister is lying out of revenge." "That's fine," I said. "Let him claim whatever he wants. The evidence will speak for itself." But I was already thinking 2 steps ahead. I was thinking about what Marcus would do when he found out. I was thinking about how scared he'd be, about how he'd want to fix this, about how he might panic and do something stupid. And I was thinking about how I could record it when he did. I called my lawyer back that evening. "If Marcus contacts me," I said, "and he tries to get me to drop the police report, can I record that conversation?" "Legally, you need to know your state's recording laws," Robert said. "Washington is a 2-party consent state. You need everyone's permission to record a phone call." "What about an in-person conversation?" "Washington allows 1-party consent for in-person recordings. If you're there, you can record without telling him." "Good," I said. "Catherine, I'm going to advise you not to engage with your brother at all. This needs to go through the legal system now. Any direct communication could be used against you." "I won't initiate contact," I said, "but if he reaches out to me, I want to be prepared." I spent the next week being meticulously calm in my daily life. I worked. I met with clients. I prepared for my licensing exam. To anyone watching, I was fine, normal, just getting on with things. At night, I set up my phone to record automatically if anyone called. I installed a security camera in my living room pointed at my couch, where any in-person conversation would naturally happen. I printed out copies of all the evidence and gave them to 3 different people I trusted: my undergraduate architecture professor, an old friend from grad school, and a colleague I'd worked with on residential projects. If anything happens to me, I told each of them, these documents need to go to the police and to my lawyer, Robert Chen. They looked at me like I was paranoid. I wasn't paranoid, I was thorough. The police contacted Marcus on a Wednesday. I knew he'd been contacted because my mother called me that evening, her voice shaking. He says it's a misunderstanding, she said. He says the police are confused about the transactions. The police understand perfectly what happened. Catherine, is there any way we can resolve this without involving the authorities further? No, I said. He's willing to repay the money, all of it plus interest. That was the moment when I understood that Marcus was genuinely afraid. The problem isn't the money, I said. The problem is that he stole it. That's what the investigation is about. I know, but... There is no but. He did it. He knew exactly what he was doing. He's been lying about it for months. And now that he's been caught, he wants to throw money at the problem and make it go away. My mother started crying. Please don't do this to your brother. Please. I hung up. I didn't hang up to be cruel. I hung up because I understood, finally and completely, that appealing to sentiment would not work. My family was not going to save me. My family was going to choose Marcus. They were going to choose the easier path, the path that didn't require them to acknowledge that the golden sun was rotten. So I wasn't going to do this for them. I was going to do this for me. 8 days after the police report was filed, I received a visitor. It was Marcus. He showed up at my apartment without calling first. I saw him through the peephole, still in his honeymoon glow, looking confused and angry and desperate. I checked my phone to make sure the recording app was active. It was. I opened the door. Hey, he said, and his voice had that familiar warmth to it, the one that made people want to give him whatever he wanted. Can we talk? Of course, I said. I stepped back to let him enter, and I made sure I was standing within range of the security camera I'd installed. He sat on the couch. I sat in the armchair across from him. The distance between us felt like a canyon. I know what's happening, he said. The police investigation, the accusations. Okay. And I need you to understand something. I didn't steal that money. I watched his face, his hands, the way his body was positioned. Everything about him was screaming the truth. He was comfortable lying. He'd always been comfortable lying. Someone accessed my bank account, I said. Someone with my login credentials transferred your father's money to an unknown account. The forensics point to my laptop that you had access to. I had access to it for like 20 minutes while I was grabbing some old files from my room. That's all you'd need. He leaned forward, and his expression shifted into something almost beseeching. Catherine, I love you. I know we've had this weird distance for the last year and a half, but I have never wanted to hurt you. I'm asking you, as your brother, to please believe me. My heart was pounding, but I kept my voice level. Then who took the money? I don't know, but I know it wasn't me. If you didn't take it, you should have no problem with the investigation. You should welcome it. The investigation will prove your innocence. He looked away. That's the thing, he said. I want to talk to you about that. I want to see if we can work something out before it goes further. What kind of something? I have money, he said. A lot of money. I'm willing to repay what was taken. I'm willing to repay it twice over. I'm willing to pay for any expenses related to the investigation. But I'm asking you to consider dropping the police report. There it was, the offer, the negotiation. The implicit admission that he was guilty and wanted to buy his way out. I can't do that, I said. Why not? Because this isn't about money. This is about honesty. Catherine, be realistic. Do you think the police are going to prosecute your brother? Do you think a jury is going to convict me based on access logs and computer forensics when I have a defense attorney that costs $3,000 an hour? He was right. He probably wouldn't face serious consequences. His lawyer would find reasonable doubt. The case would be mudded. Probably not, I said. Then what's the point? The point should be making sure you're taken care of. The point should be protecting the family. The point is that you're a liar. He flinched like I'd struck him. You're a liar, I continued, and you've been lying to our father for 18 months to make me look like a thief. You've isolated me from my family. You've made me question my own sanity, and now that you're caught, you want to buy your way out of it. I didn't lie to Dad. I presented the evidence as I understood it. You planted the evidence while I was asleep, using my laptop, after you'd already decided to frame me. Catherine, he stood up. He ran his hands through his hair. He looked genuinely distressed. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm here trying to help you, trying to protect you, and you're acting like I'm some villain. You're not a villain, I said. I realized I was standing too, that I'd mirrored his body language without intending to. You're just a person who wanted something and was willing to hurt people to get it. That's not. You wanted Dad to think I was a criminal. You wanted him to doubt me. You wanted to cement your position as the only trustworthy child, and it worked. It worked perfectly, until you got greedy. He stared at me for a long moment. If I repay every single cent, he said quietly, will you drop the charges? There are no charges yet. This is a police investigation. Will you tell the police it was a misunderstanding, that you want to withdraw your report? No. Then we have nothing else to discuss. He walked to the door. He put his hand on the knob and he turned back to look at me, and I saw something I'd never seen before in my brother's face. He saw me. Not as an extension of the family, not as the complicated younger sister, as an actual person who had just rejected him. You're going to regret this, he said. I don't think so. Dad is not going to forgive you for doing this to me. Our mother is going to hate you. Sophie will have to pick a side. You're going to blow up this entire family. The family is already blown up, I said. I'm just being honest about where the damage already is. He left. I waited exactly 5 minutes, then I transferred the recording to my lawyer. I forwarded the recording to the police. I sent copies to the 3 people I'd entrusted with my evidence. And then I called my father. Did Marcus visit you? He asked before I could speak. Did he tell you what happened? I know what happened, I said. And I have proof. I'm emailing you a recording of Marcus at my apartment, explicitly offering to repay the stolen money in exchange for me dropping the police investigation. I'm also emailing you the complete forensic analysis that shows the money was transferred from a device using my laptop login at 11:47 p.m. on a night when I was asleep in my apartment, approximately 40 minutes after Marcus left the guest house where he had accessed my computer. My father was silent. He lied to you, I said. For 18 months he lied to you, and because you believed him, you cut off your daughter, you disinherited her, you excluded her from her family. Catherine, I'm not done. I have documentation of every interaction where he manipulated the narrative. I have emails where he expressed concern about the account access. I have timing that places him at the guest house that night. I have a recording of him essentially admitting guilt by trying to bribe me to drop the investigation. And I have given all of this to the police and to my lawyer. You're making a serious mistake, my father said. Am I? Or is this the first honest thing that's happened in this family in 18 months? Marcus is going to fight this with everything he has. He has a criminal defense team that's already being mobilized. He's claiming you're mentally unstable and trying to destroy him out of revenge. Good, I said. Let him fight. The evidence speaks for itself. Catherine, I'm asking you, please, don't do this. We can work something out. We can. There's nothing to work out, I said. I was never the problem. I was just the person you chose not to believe. And now that the truth is in front of you, you're still going to choose not to believe it because that would mean admitting you were wrong about Marcus. That's not fair. Fairness isn't relevant. The facts are relevant. The facts are that your son is a thief and a liar. The facts are that he tried to frame his sister. The facts are that when caught, he tried to bribe his way out of consequences. That's what's relevant. I hung up. My phone buzzed approximately 30 seconds later with an email from my father's corporate attorney. The email informed me that my trust account had been frozen pending a family dispute resolution process. I forwarded the email to Robert Chen with a one-word message: perfect. The police investigation expanded rapidly once they had the recording. The detective, Sarah Kershaw, was able to get a warrant to examine Marcus's devices. They found evidence that he'd accessed my laptop remotely on 2 separate occasions, the one that resulted in the first theft and the one that resulted in the second. The evidence was sophisticated. He'd used a VPN. He'd routed the connection through multiple servers. He'd deleted the logs carefully. But he hadn't been careful enough, because he'd accessed it from his personal laptop, and that laptop had its own logs. And those logs created a clear trail that led directly back to him. On the advice of Robert Chen, I did not attend the first deposition. I let my lawyer handle the preliminary questioning. But I was in the waiting room, reading through pages of my own carefully organized evidence, when Marcus came out looking like he'd been hit by a truck. He saw me sitting there, and for the first time, I saw something I'd been looking for since the beginning. He was genuinely afraid. The case went to the prosecutor 3 weeks later. It was presented to a grand jury. The grand jury voted to indict my brother on charges of theft, unauthorized computer access, and wire fraud. The trial was scheduled for 7 months away. In those 7 months, my life became a strange study in patience and legal procedure. I deposed. I provided evidence. I participated in prosecutor preparation sessions. I watched my family fracture in slow motion. My mother stopped calling. My father called once, months in, and asked if there was any way to resolve this without trial. I asked him if he was asking me to commit perjury. He hung up. Sophie called. She cried. She said she didn't understand why I was doing this, and I realized that she genuinely didn't. She didn't understand that there was an alternative to protecting Marcus. She'd been trained from childhood to believe that family came before truth. I completed my licensing exam. I passed. I became a registered architect. I dedicated the day to myself, not to my family. I celebrated with my friend Jessica and her girlfriend, and I felt a lightness I hadn't felt in 2 years. The trial started on a Tuesday in November. I wore a navy suit. I did my hair carefully. I looked exactly like what I was, a successful, composed young woman. Robert Chen had coached me on my testimony. Stay calm, tell the truth, let the evidence do the work. The prosecution called me as their first witness. Marcus's defense attorney was a woman named Patricia Vanderbilt, and she was exactly what you'd expect. Expensive, sharp, and committed to making me look like a liar. She asked me why I'd waited so long to report the first theft. She asked me if I had financial problems. She asked me if I was jealous of my brother's success. And I answered every question with the truth. No, I hadn't reported the first theft because I'd been trying to protect the family. Yes, I'd had financial difficulties, but I'd solved them myself. No, I wasn't jealous of Marcus's success. I was angry that he'd stolen and lied and gaslighted me. You seem very angry, she said. I am, I said. Wouldn't you be? The jurors looked at me like they understood exactly what I meant. The prosecution presented the forensic evidence. The IT expert explained how the access logs created a clear timeline. The detective presented the recording of Marcus offering to repay the money. My father was called as a witness. And he gave testimony about the account and the missing funds. Then Marcus took the stand. He looked smaller in the witness box, diminished. He told a story about how much he'd loved his sister, how he couldn't understand why she was making up these accusations, how he'd tried to protect her when he noticed the account irregularities. He cried a little, not a lot, just enough to seem genuine. "I have never stolen from anyone," he said. "I have never committed fraud. I have never done anything but try to help my family." And I sat in the gallery, and I watched the jury's faces, and I waited to see if his talent for lying could overcome the evidence. The prosecution cross-examined him. They asked him about his IT knowledge. He admitted he had some. They asked him about the VPN access. He claimed it must have been someone else. They asked him if he'd ever accessed Catherine's laptop. "I may have used it briefly," he said carefully, "but I never did anything malicious with it." "And you have no explanation for why the access logs show your laptop remotely connecting to Catherine's machine at 11:23 p.m. on the night of the first theft." "I don't," he said, "but I can't explain it because I didn't do it." The jury did not believe him. The verdict came back on the third day of jury deliberations. Guilty on all counts. I watched my mother's face crumple from the gallery. I watched my father stare at the table like it was the most interesting thing he'd ever seen. I watched Marcus's hand reach for his lawyer's arm. The judge scheduled sentencing for 2 weeks later. In that 2 weeks, I received 3 calls from my father. I didn't answer any of them, but I listened to the voicemails. The first one was him asking me to consider making a victim impact statement that was lenient. That mentioned mental illness or stress or any mitigating factors that might reduce Marcus's sentence. The second one was him saying he'd always been proud of me, and he was sorry things had gone this way. The third one was him, his voice shaking, saying that he'd made a mistake, that he should have believed me, that he was sorry. I didn't call back. At sentencing, the judge handed down 4 years in federal prison. Marcus would serve at least 2 years before he was eligible for parole. His corporate access was revoked. His legal fees were astronomical. His marriage was already falling apart because Vanessa had discovered that her new husband was a criminal. And I sat in the courtroom, and I felt nothing. Not triumph, not satisfaction, not even relief. Just a kind of bone-deep exhaustion that suggested I'd been running on adrenaline for so long that I'd forgotten what it felt like to rest. My father tried to approach me after the verdict, but I'd already left the courtroom. I went straight to my car and I drove back to Portland. It's been 8 months since the sentencing. I'm sitting in my apartment, the same place where Marcus came to try to bribe me, the same place where I've been building my life on my own terms. The security camera is still there, pointed at the couch, but I don't need it anymore. My career is moving forward. I've started my own architecture firm. I have 3 residential projects in various stages of completion. The work is good. The work is honest. The work is mine. My mother reached out 2 months ago. She sent me an email. It was brief. It said she didn't know how to apologize for not believing me. It said she was in therapy working on understanding her own failure to protect me. It said she loved me and wanted to rebuild the relationship. I haven't responded. My father had the trust account restriction lifted. The $190,000 is officially, legally, mine. I haven't touched it. I don't know if I will. The money isn't what matters anymore. Sophie tried to stay neutral in all of this, which meant she ended up isolated from both of us. She's struggling with her own life, another failed relationship, another stalled career, and I think part of her blames me for shattering the family's foundation. Maybe that's fair. Maybe the family needed shattering. As for Marcus, he's in a federal penitentiary in Oregon. I haven't visited. I haven't written. But sometimes I wonder if he understands yet what happened. If he understands that he wasn't caught because I was stronger or smarter. He was caught because he got lazy, because he thought I'd stay broken forever. He was wrong about that. I'm not broken. I was never broken. I was just temporarily convinced that what I knew to be true might not be true. I was temporarily convinced that maybe my father's doubt meant something. Maybe the accusation meant something. Maybe I was the problem. It took a long time to convince myself otherwise. And once I did, I couldn't unconvince myself. The truth has a weight to it that doubt can't hold for long. I still go to the bank where I opened that secure safety deposit box. I go there and I add to the evidence collection, even though there's nothing more to collect, even though the case is closed. I just like knowing that everything is documented, everything is backed up, everything is safe. My licensing exam certificate is framed in my apartment. It's the most important thing I own. Last week my father called me. I answered this time. "I was wondering," he said, his voice careful, "if you'd be willing to have dinner sometime." "I don't know," I said. "I need you to know that I'm sorry. I'm genuinely sorry. I failed you as a father." "You did," I said, "but I don't know if apologizing for it changes anything for me." He was quiet for a long time. "What would need to happen for you to consider forgiving me?" I thought about this. I thought about the 18 months of rejection. I thought about being excluded from the wedding. I thought about watching my father choose comfort over truth. "I need you to understand that what happened wasn't about family loyalty," I said. "It was about you choosing the easy story over the complicated truth, and I need you to be honest about that, not apologetic, honest." "I was afraid," he said. "If I believed you, it meant I'd been wrong about Marcus. It meant the future I'd planned for the company, the legacy I'd been building, it all fell apart. It was easier to believe you were troubled than to believe my son was a criminal." "Yes," I said, "that's the truth of it." "Does that change anything?" I thought about this too. "I don't know yet," I said, "but maybe if you keep being honest, I'll find out. We're having dinner next month. I don't know if it will help. I don't know if our relationship can be rebuilt. I don't know if I want it to be rebuilt, or if I just want to exist in the same family without pretending to be anything other than what I am. But I'm willing to try." And that's the thing about revenge, I've discovered. You think it's about destroying the person who hurt you. You think it's about getting justice or vindication or some kind of cosmic balance. But it's not. Revenge is about proving to yourself that you were right all along. It's about taking back the narrative. It's about standing up and saying, "I know what I know. You don't get to convince me otherwise anymore." That's what I did, and that's what I have now. The truth. A career I built myself. A life that belongs to me. And the absolute certainty that I will never again choose comfort over reality, and I will never again let someone else write my story. That's not just revenge. That's freedom.